I'm actually going to start off with discussing some of the conversation about education before I actually get into my presentation, which Rhonda kind of led me into perfectly, because any chance I have an opportunity to talk about the success that HBCUs have in producing graduates of any type, I try to use that. So I have somewhere I'm going to talk about the benefits of HBCUs, but I want to talk about education in a broader sense. And following from Margaret Gale's talk, a lot of the discussion on the reform of public education doesn't really focus on re-education of teachers. And it mainly focuses on students' performance on tests and how's the best way we could test whether or not students are performing. It doesn't focus, as her policy talks about, as learning as a scholarly activity. And having learning as a scholarly activity will allow students to enjoy education more. If you look at some of the hypotheses that exist that state why students do not perform well, most of them say it's because students don't care. That's why they're not doing well. But almost all research shows that students want to perform well in school. And a lot of times they aren't driven to perform as well as they could because either the school lowers the curriculum, as we saw in Mississippi, where they lowered the standards so they could actually reach the levels that they need instead of trying to raise the curriculum. And I think it's exciting that there's this work out there trying to change the way teachers interact with students at a younger age to sort of make teachers learn that students have the ability to perform, because students' belief affects students' performance greatly. If a student has a teacher who believes that they're not smart, the teacher will not push the student to do well. And so teachers' beliefs are one of the main reasons that we see low performance in schools, because teachers who are in low-income schools don't expect the students to do well, and since they don't expect the students to do well, the students don't try to do well, and this just leads to not great outcome. And so I find her work interesting, and she gave me her pamphlet, and I think it's something that, as a researcher, I should actually start looking into more, because I'm mainly a higher education researcher, but I think that issues on improving teacher education and the benefits of that are extremely important way of improving education outcomes in general. Going to Rhonda's presentation about education and affirmative action, one of the interesting things that we talked about, and she mentioned it during her presentation, is the decline to 16% of the share of African Americans who actually attend HBCUs. But HBCU enrollment has gone up. So what this means is other schools are more accepting of black students than they had previously been, because HBCUs historically served as the only location that would educate blacks. And so now a black student could go to any school essentially that they want to in the world, and seeing that even with options elsewhere, and I'm going to get to that in a second, black students still choose to go to HBCUs at a high rate, has to say something about historically black colleges and universities. And she put an emphasis on completions and attendance. I'm going to actually talk about completions, and I'm going to actually promote HBCUs. And this is something that I like to do any chance that I can get. And I oftentimes hear people talk about why HBCUs still needed. So in economics, we have this concept called dollar votes, in which people spend money on things that they actually want. And so if people don't want a product or service that's produced, then people won't spend money on it and it will go away. And so I'm just going to go through completion rates using from 1990 to 2010, 26,879 in 2010. And for Hispanics, Asian Pacifics, and other ethnicities as well, you see a substantial increase. And across all these numbers, there's an increase in dollar votes for the importance of HBCUs in conferring degrees. And when you look at associate's degrees and certificates, we see the same patterns. So blacks have, from 1990 to 2010, you see an increase of 2,783 to 3,588. For whites, you see a slight increase from 2,318 to 2,380. And for Hispanics, you see a large increase from 217 to 640 in 2010. And again, this demonstrates the importance of HBCUs by increasing the number of people that actually graduate from these institutions. So I'm going to take a slight step back from that before I finish, and noting that when you look at completions, it kind of doesn't give you the full picture because it ignores graduation rates, which is one of the crises that is also being felt in the American educational system. Graduation rates have been declining because the students who enter college are different from the students who entered college in the past. In the past, college was more for the best students, the best well-prepared students, and you had much higher graduation rates. And so colleges now are educating students who are less prepared for college, and they have to sort of change the way that they interact with their students because the student population is vastly different. You have a large increase in college attendance, but not a large increase in college graduation. And this is because the change in the new students who enter into colleges. And HBCUs have traditionally accepted the students who other institutions would not accept for whatever reason. More HBCUs tend to be open admission institutions and allow you to come as you are to allow students to get access to education that they previously wouldn't have. And so going back to the completion numbers, if you just count the total number across all years from 1990 to 2010, HBCUs have produced over 6,900 doctorates, 138,000 master's and first professional degrees, over 550 bachelor degrees, and over 119,000 associate degrees and certificates. Over a 20-year span, this is over 818,000 completions. And so if you want to know whether or not HBCUs are relevant, you can just look at the product that they produce in the form of their graduates to know that HBCUs are still relevant, that their relevance is increasing due to the nature of higher education now. Thank you very much.